Ladies and gentlemen, Gallup has a new poll out. Concern about the environment is down. The number of Americans worried about the environment, the number of Americans who list global warming as a primary problem is in fact, it's the last thing they worry about. The Clinton campaign has issued a list of words and terms to the drive-by media in the form of a threatening email to a New York Times infobabe, telling them these are the words you cannot use to describe Mrs. Clinton. One word that's not on the list is cankles. I guess everybody in the media is free to use the word cankles. But their list of words, well, it's not on the list. I thought it would be on the list. What, is that sexist? I thought it would be, but it's not on the list. You can say cankles, but I'll tell you what's on. There's more cockamamie, off the wall news that to you and me is cockamamie off the wall. To the left, it's mainstream, makes all the sense in the world. So sit tight. We're going to come back, get rolling on all the other stuff happening out there today. Right after this, don't go away. I want to take you back. As we swerve now into the words that the Clinton campaign is warning drive-by journalists not to use when covering Mrs. Clinton. Before getting to that list, I want to remind you of something. I want to remind you of something that I said way back August 12, 2013. I've actually said this many times on the program. We just threw a dart up on the wall and pick a random date. And I've said this a number of times, but this instance happens to be from August 12th of 2013. The Democrats have learned something here profound. You've got the first black president. He's immune from criticism. You cannot criticize the guy. Any criticism is racism. We have a president of the United States who cannot be criticized. His policies cannot be criticized, not credibly. Anybody who tries is diminished and dismissed as a racist or a bigot. And so Obama can get away with anything he wants. And I think Democrats have seen this. So imagine the first female president. Same thing. Any criticism, sexist. Any criticism, unjust. Any criticism, unwarranted. Any criticism, not real. Any criticism, not substantive. It's all based in anti-woman. It's all based on a Republican war on women. It's not based on anything substantive. The Democrats' modus operandi is to eliminate opposition, and this is one of the ways they do it. And then after Hillary, they'll move for the first Hispanic president, and the same thing will repeat. No criticism of the first. After that, they'll need to get the first gay president, and no criticism allowed there. Then after that, the first transgendered president. After that, the first, I don't know, from Mars, whatever, but it's going to be a protracted policy, I think, that they're going to keep trying to implement. And the fact that I was right about that is being borne out with Mrs. Clinton and her campaign and this list of words that reporters are not to use because the words are said to be sexist. And sexism will not be permitted. This is making my point. The Hillary campaign, before it's even officially a campaign, is getting in gear and attempting to implement the same guiding procedures that have protected Obama all these years. You'll see what I'm talking about when I get to the list, which we will do shortly after this. Now, I have to point something out, folks. This rule of firsts that the Democrats have successfully implemented with Obama, it never works for Republicans. It only works for Democrats. The rule of first, the rule of no criticism of firsts, did not apply, for example, the first female Secretary of State, first black female. That was Condoleezza Rice, and it was open season. The fact that she was the first black female Secretary of State did not make her immune to criticism because she was a Republican. In fact, she was Sarah Palin. They even did cartoon strips portraying her as an Aunt Jemima, with the cartoon illustrations emphasizing the so-called African-American characteristics of appearance. And they even portrayed her as getting the job and accused her of getting the job by performing, shall we say, various type of sex acts at the high officials in the Republican Party. All of that was fair game. They could go after Condoleezza Rice all they wanted and did. And how about the first black male Secretary of State? That would be Colonel Colin Powell. People went after him, even though he was the first black male Secretary of State. The rule of first did not apply to him, nor did it apply to the first Hispanic Attorney General. George W. Bush broke the racial barrier on a number of positions, and it didn't matter. Every one of his appointees was destroyed, or at least they tried. But with Barack Obama, any criticism disallowed. Any and all criticism was chalked up to racism. And it worked. The Republican establishment and many in the media just don't want to go anywhere near being called a racist, and so they just shut up. And now Hillary is attempting to implement it for herself, on the theory that she's going to be the first female president. From the Daily Caller. It's a confusing article, by the way, but here it is in a nutshell. The New York Times' Amy Chozick posted on Twitter yesterday that a Hillary group had emailed her with a list of words that she was not to use when describing Hillary. Now, this group is called the HRC Super Volunteers, Hillary Rodham Clinton Super Volunteers. They've been around since 2007, and they were active at the beginning of Hillary's 2008 campaign. Their email to the New York Times InfoBabe ended with a warning. Quote, "You are on notice that we will be watching, reading, listening, and protesting coded sexism." Close quote. Now, the Daily Caller got hold of the tweet and listed the words. And here they are. Here are the words that the Hillary Clinton campaign sent out to the New York Times reporter Amy Chozick, telling her she can't use. Polarizing. You may not use the word polarizing to describe Mrs. Clinton. You cannot use the word calculating to describe Mrs. Clinton. You cannot use the word disingenuous when describing Mrs. Clinton. You cannot use the word insincere when describing it. All of these words are said to be coded sexism. Polarizing, calculating, disingenuous, insincere. These are coded sexist words, and the Clinton campaign is going to be calling the media. We're not through. Ambitious. Ambitious. You cannot refer to Mrs. Clinton as ambitious. That is coded sexism. Women are supposed to be like Ann Romney, lazy and eating bonbons all day. Or whatever you do with bonbons. You do eat bonbons, don't you? What are bonbons anyway? That's what little chocolatey things in there. Like petit fours or petite fours or whatever the heck those things are. You sit around sipping cocktails and eating your bonbon. But that's what women are thought to do in elite circles, but no. You're not to use the word inevitable. Inevitable is also said to be sexist. Entitled. Entitled is a word not permitted. Again, these words were sent to a reporterette for the New York Times, warning her not to use these words in describing Mrs. Clinton because this group is going to be sitting out there watching, reading, and listening. Overconfident is also a term not to be used in association with Mrs. Clinton. Secretive, also, like as in these latest news stories about emails and servers. Secretive. That's said to be sexist. Will do anything to win. Mrs. Clinton cannot be so described as willing to do anything to win because that is sexist. Represents the past. Can't use the term or this group that's monitoring will be on you. Out of touch. You can't describe Mrs. Clinton as out of touch. And according to the New York Times reporter, Amy Chozick, the email from the HRC super volunteers went on to warn again, you are on notice that we will be watching, we will be reading, listening, and protesting coded sexism. Well, how about the other terms? You know, Obama said of Mrs. He's nice enough, Hillary nice enough. I mean, that kind of sexist. And how about cankles? I would think cankles would be at the top 5 of these word lists that you can't use. Wrinkles? There could be another one in there. Screechy? Shrill? Hysterical? Sniper fire? I mean, there's any number of words I would think that would also be on it. How about bossy? Why can't they forgot? Certainly they don't intend for people to describe Mrs. Clinton as bossy. And how about, there's another one. How about the B word that rhymes with witch? Why isn't that? Brian, I didn't say it. You don't have to go. They're shaking their heads in there like, man, Rush gets so close to the line every day. I didn't get close to the line. I would say B-I-itch. Why isn't that word on the list? So we've got cankles, nice enough, bossy, wrinkles, screechy, shrill, hysterical, wrinkly, needs to iron her face. None of that stuff's on the list that you can't say. Anyway, but make no mistake. I mean, this is funny and it's lighthearted in a way, but this group is serious. They are threatening this reporter at the New York Times. And I would have to bet you that the reporter at the New York Times will obey. I'll bet you that this Amy Chozick is going to be obedient. Well, she's a fellow female, and I'm sure she's going to take this as educational. I mean, this is one of the goddesses of modern era feminism. That would be Mrs. Clinton. She's an arbiter. She knows what's proper and what is not proper. And Mrs. Clinton is not only asking for this, demanding for this herself, but also to protect the sisterhood, so as to maintain the dignity and respect of the collective group.